The federal government, the United States, now owns part of Intel. We own a
10%.
company, which is funny coming from the Republicans because it's a pretty socialist thing to do. And
Did you see Gavin Newsom's?
no, what do you say?
He put an image of Trump in front of a communist flag saying, "All hail our socialist leader who's now got us." Like,
It's really
That's pretty fire.
It's really bizarre to come from the Republicans who are cheering this on. So, quick history of why Intel specifically, because we talked last week about the idea of the government buying a company and having part in it, and how this is not standard for an American company. This is not the norm. The US government doesn't just like hold companies unless it's fully owned. Intel's a bit different. We all know Intel, presumably, because we're all, gamers and it runs our computers and everything. And Intel,
not me.
what?
They burned me too many times, bro. I went to AMD.
And
this
you went to
year.
AMD?
I hated AMD because I was an NVIDIA guy, obviously, but now I'm NVIDIA, AMD, dual because
Right.
I can't stand Intel, bro. I'll continue on, but they're woke.
I knew it.
So Intel comes out as microchip manufacturer. Microchips are unbelievably complex and hard to make. If you go watch a YouTube video about it, watching a video about how microchips are made sounds like in a movie or a TV show where they have like the science hacker who is intentionally saying things that make no sense. And at the end, somebody's like, "In English, scientist." It's like that, but real and for 10 straight minutes.
on into the Glaxifier.
It's that.
Yeah.
Like I have a decent amount of technical knowledge, and even I am like, what the fuck is going on? It is truly baffling how complex it is to make microchips. We are doing it at like nano scale. We are making a city into a chip. It is unbelievable. So very hard stuff. Over the decades, Intel came out and they were dominant. They were the PC manufacturer chips. They made the dominant ones. We've all seen Intel's running our PCs. But they started to really fall behind in the past 2 decades. So there's 2 big areas. One was mobile. So as mobile phones started to take off and become this massive part of our ecosystem, mobile phones have a very different, let's say, incentive than a PC at home. What matters the most is battery. But what Intel had done is made chips that were incredibly good at like doing tasks that are really complex and doing them fast, but use a lot of battery, use a lot of power. And so Intel's chips were not actually very good at mobile computing because they're just going to burn through a mobile device's battery really fast. So ARM came in, which is this British manufacturer, made a different instruction set architecture, basically a different system for making chips, and said, we're doing this specifically for mobile. And ARM now dominates mobile chips. So basically any computer chip that goes into a mobile device, Intel has nothing to do with. It's other companies like Apple or Samsung who are using ARM's architecture and they're making mobile. So as the mobile, device has exploded over the past couple decades, Intel has been completely left in the dark. They've tried multiple times to make like a mobile version of their architecture. Didn't work. They couldn't do it. So that was the first big failure. And the second one is now AI. So AI is coming out. And what do you want with AI? Well, AI is not about doing a couple things really, really well. It's about doing billions of math equations. So if you buy, let's say, a 16-core processor from Intel, you buy that for your computer, you can roughly think of this as 16 guys who are really smart, who can do tasks for you. And that's really good if you're doing Photoshop or, browsing the internet or whatever else. You're only doing a couple things. But if you're trying to do AI, you actually just need like a billion math equations to be done. So would you rather have 16 really smart guys to do a billion math equations or 100,000 dumb guys who can do math equations?
Why would I, as a man, want 16 men in my PC?
16 women, maybe hot women.
So instead of these 16 guys in an Intel processor, because again, it's made for the PC, that's what they've fundamentally been building. In a GPU like NVIDIA has, the whole point of it is that instead of having a 16-core processor, there'll be thousands of cores. Each core is a hot woman who can just do linear algebra, okay? And nothing else. And so...
Turn that around. Just, dude.
And so if the entire thing underpinning AI, which it is linear algebra and doing just an absolute shit ton of these equations, the NVIDIA chip, even though it was originally meant for gaming, happens to be the exact same thing. It happens to be a chip that is designed to do a billion short, simple math equations, but can't handle the complex stuff. So Intel is really good at their niche and has failed at both mobile and AI because they are fundamentally designed for something else.
This is like the exact speech Jensen Huang gave to all the new hires today. Well, I'm not kidding.
Really?
He didn't say hot women in the cards, but he basically said, he's like, the Moore's Law fell apart for Intel.
Yeah.
They're not useful critical for this thing. Yeah, exactly. I mean, they went through some things you did. Yeah, it's funny.
And so that's all well and good. But again, coming back to manufacturing chips. Now, if you are Trump or anybody who is trying to figure out the future of America, I think everybody is on the same page. AI is going to be very important to the future, whether you like it or not. In that headspace, you need to be able to manufacture computer chips. Even setting aside AI, right now, if we weren't able to manufacture any computer chips, like computers run our society,
I
right?
was gonna say, even if you took this element out of the equation, right? So much of basic technology and especially like defense technology rests in your ability to create chips like
Yes. Everything now runs on chips. Everything that we do. I mean, our fucking toasters have chips. Like everything has our cars have chips.
80% of them are made in Taiwan. And Taiwan is stone's throw away from China, which is our largest geopolitical rival, and wants Taiwan.
Yes.
And you can't allow that risk.
And some say it's a part of China.
Some say China's West Taiwan.
G, if you happen to be listening and pondering whether you want to come on the show.
Please let us in when we come in a few months.
So there's
it's up in the air, and we need to visit to figure it out. And honestly, I'm really open to the idea that Taiwan.
If China let us in, we would for sure think Taiwan.
Yeah, 100%.
I'm saying that if I was treated in a certain way, my political views could be shifted.
100%. That's true. We can be bought, G.
We want to modernize our views. We want to Cracker Barrel redesign them for the modern age.
Tim Pool, I'm looking at you, baby. You did it. You paved the way.
If we get $100,000 a month from Xi Jinping to talk,
oh yeah.
I would.
No, we won't do that.
I would do that.
Turn the hat back around, bro. Be Aiden again.
I'm a soy cuck who wouldn't compromise my beliefs about Taiwan for
be so rich.
You're so woke.
But okay, so
real quick, So why does Intel specifically matter? There's all these companies around the world that make chips. Well, the thing is, there's the designing a chip, which is you come up with how it's going to work and power your device, and then there is actually making the thing. Actually making the thing is unbelievably, obscenely hard.
Yep.
Intel is able to make their own chips. They actually manufacture them in America, and essentially no one else does. The only other companies that are making chips go to Taiwan, and they ask TSMC, the Taiwanese company, to make them because they currently make the most advanced ones. There's also Samsung. But Samsung is even then largely, using TSMC. So the only company in America, the only American company that can make a chip is Intel. If, for example, suddenly Taiwan was cut off from America for some reason, we would not have any more NVIDIA chips. They're all made in Taiwan by TSMC. We would not have most of the chips that we use for mobile devices or our fridge or our cars or whatever else, right? So it is an existential threat. And the only company left that can do it is Intel. And they are floundering. They are getting worse. They're falling behind TSMC in their ability to make them. They aren't doing well in AI. They aren't doing well in mobile, but they are the only one in America who can make them. Asterisk, there's other companies trying. TSMC is opening branches in the United States.
Yeah, they got an Arizona plant.
But they aren't caught up yet. And again, that company relies on TSMC. If TSMC suddenly was taken by China right now, it is, to my knowledge, at least a couple months ago, unlikely that those plants would really do much.
I also have a loose understanding that, through the CHIPS Act that was passed under Biden, the idea is we're going to give a lot of support and money to not only TSMC to come over and create this new factory in Arizona, but give a lot of money to support Intel.
Yes.
And they haven't done very well with that so far,
yes,
which is part of the reason why the buy-in is happening now.
Right. Yeah, so Biden already with the CHIPS Act was like, we're going to give a bunch of money to these companies. We're going to try to get foreign chip manufacturers to build factories in America. We're going to try to get our American chip companies to make more here. And we're going to help Intel make sure they can open a whole other factory. We'll make sure it happens with the money. The money isn't happening. So one approach to this is you say, Intel, you're sucking balls. You're going to die. We're not helping you. And another approach is to just give them more money, which is what the CHIPS Act was the Trump administration says, here's another $40 billion, like get it done. Make that chip plant in Ohio. And a third option is they buy or take part of Intel. And that's what happened. And the CEO of Intel basically said, the United States government, can have 10% of our company. And this is a very weird precedent that kind of makes sense as a national security point of view and is also super weird.
To be clear, they did buy it. The U.S. government was not handed 10%. Trump said that happened, but what actually happened is there was $9 billion left over of CHIPS Act money that didn't get dispersed to Intel because they didn't reach one of those milestones.
Oh.
There was a milestone they didn't reach. So it's kind of like they didn't know what
so
to
the
do
CHIPS grant is now purchasing part of it.
The $9 billion leftover CHIPS grant that wasn't set to be given to Intel, Trump was like, well, that's free money.
I mean, you got $9 billion.
You got it sitting around. So he used it to buy, not at market value, slightly below market value, so maybe there was some sort of deal there, but he bought 300 million shares of Intel. And so he got 10%.
Has there been any plan, public communicated plan about what this ownership means and the way it's supposed to affect the company, other than a general idea that things are supposed to.
No.
Everybody in the room, including
it's
Carrie,
crazy to
just
imagine there be a
laughed.
plan because at the beginning of this month, he was calling the CEO a Chinese spy who needs to step down. After one
this
meeting,
is like a week ago.
yeah, this is all so recent.
A week ago, he called the CEO. What? Clearly compromised and needed to resign.
Is he compromised?
No, dude, we can talk about Lip Bhutan. Lip Bhutan, look, while he was working at Cadence, which is a company that helps create the software to design chips, very important company, he was very successful. He may have given some tech to a Chinese military university, okay?
Okay.
And he did do that. And that is the concern. And, he's now saying like, look, we it was above board and there was a slight mistake there and yada, yada. But
Did we
he
all
seems
do
like he's
that
fine.
growing up?
Never gave a little tech to the Chinese.
You never
I lived
gave
in a
a
military
little-
base growing up. I was selling secrets left and right. A little money on the side.
They would come to my door. They'd be
And
like,
I think I afforded golden
have
and
anything?
perfect dark.
That's all weird. I'm with you from last week, Atrog, which is just, it feels very strange for the US government to pick winners. And by buying 10% of Intel and now having influence over the way the company's operated, it's like, in theory, you want to encourage lots of different companies to try to compete and do this successfully. And it just feels weird that now the US government will be incentivized to make Intel succeed more so than others.
It is interesting. I want to contrast this a bit with my understanding of the Chinese approach to these things. We just read a book. We released a book club episode called The House of Huawei, which is about Huawei, a giant telecom and consumer product company that exists primarily in China, but all over the world. They, in that book, lay out the ways the government has influence in Chinese companies. But one of the examples it gives is that Huawei, this private company, still requires to have, you have to have party members who are on the board inside your company, who are there to sort of dictate values of the party or influence direction of the company based on what the party desires. Even though the company is technically private, China doesn't actually own that company, though. They have influence through that mechanism. And if we look at an industry like EVs, China's primary approach wasn't to, take over the private market within their country. They laid out a bunch of incentives and subsidies for the entire supply chain behind EVs and encouraged basically as many companies as possible to proliferate and chase the EV dream. And now have as companies came out of that winners, certain ones becoming particularly successful, they pulled back the subsidies and are letting the winners run, basically. And I think this is a very different situation rather than creating an environment where a bunch of these companies might pop up and compete in the future. They are picking the winner and we need to bet on this single horse and primarily lean on that as being successful. I understand also that the Chinese approach that I just described literally took over the place of many, many years, right? You can't create a bunch of new chip manufacturers and companies overnight. But I do think that this doesn't seem like it's laying the groundwork for a bunch of companies to come out successful 10, 20 years from now.
Yeah, I agree. I think I talked about this on stream. I'm obviously against it. I think it leads to a lot of conflicts of interest. And this guy on my Reddit, I don't know if you can pull my screen here, he brought up a Denmark company as an example, where he said, he wanted to support what I was saying about conflict of interest and a trap of failure.
Oh, a Dutch company.
Basically, what I said was that, if you're Trump and you negotiate this deal and you get 10% of Intel, you can't realistically, politically let Intel fail. If the money you give them isn't enough or they need more, or you have to put your thumb on the scale in more ways, you will continue to throw good money after bad to keep this national champion afloat. Which kind of puts them in a situation where they're not really under market pressure to get better or improve at all.
Right.
And so this happened to this Denmark company. I don't know. You know how to pronounce this? Orsted? How am I with the O with the line through it?
Ørsted,
Okay.
I think
It was
that
originally
owns
known as Dong Energy.
But I
Anyway,
might
the
be wrong.
Danish state had 50% of the stake, and it was considered strategically important for Denmark's green energy transition. The idea was to secure national interests by tying government directly to a key industrial player. But governments don't act like other shareholders. They've continually run into trouble with huge cost overruns, collapsing U.S. ambitions, and massive write-downs. The stock plunged 80% in 5 years, down 40% year to date. So they had to keep issuing new shares to stay alive, and the government had to keep stepping in with additional 30 billion DKK, 4.3 billion US, in liquidity support to stabilize the company. It's the same slippery slope A-Track warns about with Intel. Once the government is financially and politically tied to a company, failure is no longer an option. Taxpayers have to continually backstop these bad companies. And I feel like this will happen with Intel, and already sort of happened with the CHIPS Act and Joe Biden. Like we threw money at it. They didn't hit the milestones. Now we're throwing more money at it to get a percent. Now we're going to throw more money at it because it's an American company. Maybe we'll get more of a percent next time until eventually it's a state-owned failure. Like what is at a certain point, they have to make a good product and be on time and do what all their competitors are able to do.
I'm endlessly going back and forth between, because I saw the top comment on this and is also bringing up this idea of like some kind of utilities need to be government owned to make sure they're actually available to the population versus, unfortunately, when governments own things, they tend to, once you lose the incentive to actually perform and, improve your product and compete in the market, things get slow and sluggish and inefficient. You see that over and over and over.
I had a recent conversation with somebody because it sounds like in this case, they're helping Denmark's energy transition, right? They're developing new technology and helping push towards this goal of like a greener society. It reminds me of a conversation I had a while ago about co-ops with somebody, and they were explaining how the co-op structure of businesses makes the most sense when you have an existing business that is very solid, stable, doesn't need to make any drastic improvements or changes to its business model, and just brings in some sort of consistent revenue for a consistent service. That business model makes a lot of sense for a co-op style business. But when you have something that is more cutting edge or something that is responsible for developing a new technology, having that company be a co-op actually limits it in a bunch of ways. I think this is similar where these companies that are responsible for innovation and developing some sort of key technology for a national security interest actually are hurt by being nationally owned because of this all-in like sunk cost fallacy issue of, well, if they aren't subject to the same market pressures to get anything done, but you feel obligated to keep pumping in whatever you need to sustain them. And if it doesn't play out, you just have to keep chasing that loss. Whereas if, in the case of a public utility, like we get water to people's homes, they pay us money for the water they use every month. Like it makes sense for that to be just provided by the government because there's no big innovation in the way we get water to people's homes once you've set that all up. Does that make sense?
No, it does. I mean, there's things like natural monopolies, right? Where you just want the government to step in because you don't want 100 different private companies laying their own power lines or water lines or, they can't all do it. There's not enough physical space.
Or something I was thinking of is like Norway's oil is nationalized from what I understand, right? And that business is pretty clear cut. It's like we're bringing in oil or energy and we like sell that. There's no huge innovation in that process or in what we need to develop there to like make that company like grow or move forward. But in this company's case, right, they're responsible for developing new energy technologies that are supposed to move the nation
difficult
forward.
Technology.
Bernie Sanders was surprisingly supportive of this move by Trump. I guess it's not surprising if you think about it in like a socialist perspective, but his statement was that like, if the taxpayers are going to give money to microchip companies like Intel, they should be able to get a return. And my counterpoint was that I think the return should be done through taxes. If you want to get money back to the people for healthcare from Burger King and McDonald's, you just have a corporate tax rate. No matter who's winning, I'm getting 20% or whatever. But if I buy 10% of Burger King, then now Burger King has to win for the citizen to get a return. I think picking and choosing an individual company feels like but I will acknowledge, I fully acknowledge, and you've brought this up in your history, is like Intel. The thing I hate about this is that Trump is saying, I want to do this 100 more times. Trump is like, this is a great idea. I want to do this for many more companies. Because Intel is such a unique case of a unique product in a unique time. And we can't wait for 100 new competitors to rise up. We have, I can see that this is a unique spot. But the idea in general, I'm very against.
Yeah, I think in principle, I feel like China's approach is much better, where you're creating the environment of incentives to encourage as many the best company to come forward and like dominate that industry. That seems like a better approach. But maybe because of the security interests around this issue, you simply do not have the time to like go that route. Or maybe there's not the political will either. Like maybe you just couldn't accomplish it.
I feel like I had a different takeaway from that book than you do. It feels like kind of the point of the book was the Chinese government is saying they're not very involved, wink, wink, but they are clearly dictating everything at all times.
In that
or
book,
at least there is the ever-present threat at all times. They're like, oh, we might purge you. Oh, we might shut you down. Oh, we might take everything from you.
No, they still have all those levers, right? But what I mean is, if we were to look at the book of like telecom companies, they didn't just like I don't really feel like they made Huawei the kingpin. There was like other competing telecom companies in the space. One they actually did directly own.
Right.
And then if you look at a more modern version of this, because Huawei appearing is through in a different time of Chinese history to begin with, right? I think a better look is at the EV market, where it's not just BYD, right? BYD is the most successful company, or one of the most successful companies out of tens, maybe hundreds of like EV/battery companies in China that popped up within their, private-ish market that was built upon the incentives and subsidies that they created. Now, at the end of the day, do they have a bunch of ways of moderating and pulling levers on companies within that environment that don't exist in America? 100%.
Yeah, but that
they
initial
functionally-
baseline,
They created a marketplace and let the competition do the work. That is what China did for that market.
Yeah, and they subsidize those marketplaces.
Yeah,
at the
and the
beginning.
same thing for solar companies that exist in China as well.
I would agree. I think the EV market in China in the past few years has been one of the most competitive markets of anything in the world lately. Like, it is the most real example of companies fighting brutally over price and innovation and quality to try and gain market share. And the winner is the consumer, because they get more cars to choose from at better prices. I think it is working. I think that system works. I wouldn't say for everything China does, but for EVs, and I think there's something to be learned from that. And I think it's the opposite of what we're doing with Intel.
Yeah, this is not what we're doing
here. This is a
here.
failing company at the end of its cycle that we're going to buy into. Guys, we're running low on time. There's many more things to discuss.